Hello, America, and welcome to the Older Bulls podcast. Tonight, I'm going to be calling my episode Comfort Kills Creating Stressors in Our Lives. In these rough times that we're going through, we're going to be tested in ways that we may never have been previously. Maybe we've lived a life with relatively no adversity, or at least nothing in comparison to what is raining down on us right now. I've always had a problem with being comfortable personally. I actually describe myself as somebody who is uncomfortable being comfortable. When I talk to my friends, it absolutely drives my family crazy. I'll sit on the floor in the middle of the living room rather than sitting on the couch. I sit with my feet square in front of me and my back. I have a hard time being in a position of leisure, is what I call it. My problem, nobody else's. In order to prepare for adversity and rough times such as these, we need to be sure that we're always creating voluntary stressors in our lives. What I mean by this is that before we have real stressors put on us involuntarily, we need to have had more voluntary stressors that we put on ourselves. This will allow us more elasticity in the face of involuntary stressful situations, I think. It allows us to develop coping mechanisms or defenses. This will give us greater bandwidth and negotiating room to help deal with adversity thrown our way by life every single day. Voluntary physical stressors help us to become more physically and emotionally resilient, fit, and helps our immune system toughen up as well. And that's just proven. You can Google that. We have a better shot at success if we have a physical or biological threat when we are prepared for that threat. These physical stressors, these voluntary physical stressors, help us to deal with things like anxiety, depression, and physical strain. When I create voluntary stressors, I am in the driver's seat. It makes me feel like I have some kind of control in my life. When we are T-boned by involuntary stressors in life, like most of us right now in one way or another, we feel as though we don't have a lot of control over what happens. I know that I don't feel like I have a lot of control of what's going on in the world right now. The only thing I have control over is how I react to what's happening. So what are some of these voluntary stressors that I'm talking about? Well, physical challenge is obviously one thing. When you voluntarily put demands or stressors on your body to be able to better handle the involuntary physical stress life offers up, you're in a better place. Cold showers or cold plunges allow you to deal with and control physical stressors. This is a big thing right now, the cold showers and the cold plunges. Google it. You'll find a lot of information on it. It's pretty amazing. When we feel like we have no control in our lives, and right now that is something that so many people are going through, you need an outlet that will allow you to have control or some semblance of control, something you can conquer, manage, overcome. When you get angry about things that you cannot affect, you feel powerless. We need to find a way to quell that anger. It doesn't make the situation go away, but it allows you to reframe it from a place of peace. We need to create a routine of stressors to give us something to push back against. We need to be challenging ourselves physically, emotionally, and intellectually. Don't fall into the trap of being comfortable. Comfort kills. Agency is of the utmost importance in a man's life, in anyone's life. But in order to achieve this, we need to figure out what we want to be right now, at this moment, and form an action plan that will get us to where we want to go. We need to be players in our own lives. We should never depend on anyone else to make us what we want to be or to get us where we want to go. We need to be generous with what we have, our special gifts, whatever they may be. It's our responsibility to share our gifts with the world, or at least the people in our lives. I've said this before in previous episodes. So I'm going to share a little story with you about Jim, the maintenance man. I went over to visit my mother today. She needed the plunger in her toilet, the flapper that's in the tank of the toilet, replaced. So I went over there and I took a picture, because I don't know how many of you know how many different flappers there are. Inevitably, I buy the wrong one. So I took a picture of it. I went to the hardware store. I found it. But as I was leaving my mother's house, after I had assessed the flapper situation, I saw Jim, her maintenance man. I mean, this is a heavy-set guy, older man. My mom had told me previously that he is always yelling and cursing and swearing. Nothing ever goes his way. He was standing in front of a dumpster with this mattress topper, those it folded in half. And I was just looking at him, and I have been in his situation so many times. That's why I knew what he was feeling. I was walking to my Jeep, and I looked at him, and he was just trying to size this thing up. He was looking at the mattress topper. He was looking at the dumpster, and it wasn't that it was too heavy, but you guys know, all of you have tried to manhandle something, and you just can't get your arms around it. You just can't lift it up. It's something that just simply takes two people. So as I'm walking out, I just looked at him and walking to my Jeep, and I said, I'm going over there. So I walked over there. I said, Jim, look like you need some help. How can I help? He said, oh, you gotta be kidding me. What timing. This is unbelievable. So I went over there in 10 seconds, 15 tops. I helped this guy put this thing into the dumpster, made his day. And it took nothing from me other than an effort to see that somebody needed help and go over there and do what I could. It was absolutely nothing. So be successful by defining your own success. And that's how I define mine, by helping people when I can. Don't let society tell you what that success looks like, or anybody else for that matter. Dig deep, look inside, and search for what you want to be, and start on that path right now. Light yourself on fire, blow yourself up, find your drive, and let the people in your life watch you. Give them front row seats to the experience, and let them be influenced by it. I have a couple of other things that I wanted to share tonight too. This next section I call Toughness Training for Life. Those of you who don't know, I've been a teacher for 30 years. Those of you who do know, sorry, you're hearing it over and over. Toughness training can be applied to the academic world, in athletics and leadership, and in almost every aspect of our lives. Studies have shown that students can and will work towards higher levels of performance and resiliency through an understanding and commitment to the cycles of stress and recovery. So emotional toughness, as I define it, is the ability to deal with life in a flexible, responsive, strong, and resilient way. Emotional toughness is a natural outcome of mental and physical toughening. The things that I was just talking about, those stressors in your life, how do you deal with that? Do you have adversity? Do you have practice dealing with adverse situations? These areas of toughening are closely linked and highly dependent upon one another. The physical and mental portions of a strengthening regimen are sometimes referred to as outside in, physical, or inside out, mental toughening. Respectfully, and the studies show that waves of stress should be experienced in order to strengthen health, vitality, and productivity in our lives. A person's emotional toughness will largely determine the outlook he or she has in all aspects of life. A mentally, physically, and emotionally strong response to stress is the hallmark of the toughened individual. It's my definition of grit. We can compare the waves of stress that I was talking about, being referred to here, to an athlete who partakes in interval training. Those of you who have done HIIT training, high intensity training. This is a training method in which athletes run short distances at a blazing pace to keep close to their maximum speed, whatever it is. So you can do sprints outside, you can do them on a treadmill, you can sprint on a bike, whatever you're going to do, it's almost as close to your maximum capacity as you can get. They try to reach their anaerobic thresholds, and it's followed up with a period of recovery, which is slowing down. So if you were doing sprints, you would walk or jog, in which your heart rate lowers and your respiration returns to normal levels. And the athlete would repeat this interval several times. So if I was doing sprints on my treadmill, I would do 30-second sprints or 45-second sprints at a level 10 or 12 on my treadmill. And then for 30 or 45 seconds, I would walk or jog. And I would do that for 8 reps. So exposing our students or our athletes or whoever we're teaching to the tenets of toughness or emotional interval training shows promise, as far as studies show, for helping students at all levels to develop the behaviors and convictions of the highest performing athletes. Outside in and inside out toughness training work together to strengthen the individual, to strengthen us. I think it's clear that bouts of stress serve to remind students and individuals, all of us, that they are capable of absorbing, enduring, and even inviting stress into their lives in order to grow and toughen, or in other words, become more flexible, resilient, and strong, like I mentioned earlier. Using simple, practical, everyday experiences with stress can provide relatively risk-free bouts of stress that can teach students the benefits of healthy stress and familiarize them with the way that stress and recovery feel. Okay, so this is something that I talk to my students about. When I mention to these young adolescents the word stress, the immediate connotation is negative, like stress is a bad thing. And I have to tell them that stress is not a bad thing. Stress can be a motivator. And the same thing with anxiety. People think, well, the young people think anyway, because of the culture that we're growing up in right now, that anxiety is a bad word, and it isn't. Anxiety is a good thing too. It's how you handle it that can be positive or negative. Stress does not build character, it reveals it. And that's another lesson that we talk about in 7th and 8th grade. I don't think that any of us are too old to really think of it that way. And as I was talking about earlier, the times that we're going through right now, you're seeing some unbelievable behavior, both positive and negative, that this stress is actually revealing. So it's a pretty important point to make, I think, to our youngsters and to each other. Okay, so as an elementary school teacher, I also taught gym. The way that our PE program was set up was the way that our classroom was set up. We had 1st through 6th graders in the same class for academics in the classroom and for physical education as well. We would mostly work on team sports for the most part anyway. And for preparation there, we would practice skills and drills and occasionally game situations, but we would rarely get into playing games unless it was something like volleyball, which always worked, and I'm not really sure how, even with the first graders. Imagine a bunch of 6-year-olds playing volleyball. But think about that. We had 6 to 12-year-olds working together. Do you have any idea what the difference in athletic ability is there between 6 and 12-year-olds? Those of you who have young children, you know. Those of you who coach, you know too. We're talking about kids who could barely dribble a basketball, and others who could use 6-year-olds as their cones and dribble circles around them and do figure eights. In my 15 years or so of teaching gym, I had some exceptional athletes who went on to high school and college level play. My point here is that we stressed leadership, teamwork, and sportsmanship first and foremost in that PE class. Just think about how fast things could or would get ugly and out of control if these older students, the ones who were in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, decided to go full throttle, if they decided that they were going to play as hard as they could. The older kids would literally pummel the younger ones. They'd run over them. They would steamroll them. Instead, our students were more like mentors and teachers. Really, that's what they were expected to be, and so they were. The whole reason I brought this up under this topic was to say that our program was designed with these extreme ages in mind, or these age ranges in mind. We needed our more talented athletes to check their competitive selves at the gym door and become more of a mentor or a coach. To see these boys and girls temper their desire to want to dominate, show off, or play hard was incredible to see. They passed when they had a shot in basketball. They let a younger child take more than 3 strikes so that they could actually hit the ball. They overlooked the double dribbling and so many other things so that these younger athletes could get better and improve. They were able to understand what their roles were, and they played them to perfection. It was never about them personally. They knew that when they crossed the threshold of the gym doors, they needed to flip that M in me, the word me, upside down. These were competitive athletes who understood when to flip their competitive switches on and off. Is it really all about winning when we think about it? And I'm not on the side of the people involved in the whole self-esteem movement that says competition is a bad thing for children, or the people who have removed dodgeball as a staple of gym classes, or that say that we shouldn't use real jump ropes to teach the children how to jump rope because the kids who aren't able to do it will be embarrassed. No, that's absolutely not representative of how I am or how I feel. But let's look at soccer, youth soccer in particular. My youngest son's coach many years ago was a stickler for teaching the art of passing. He was a collegiate level player, and he had moved on in his career, and now he was coaching youth soccer in my suburb. He knew the game, understood the game, and wanted to make sure that his young athletes learned how to play it the way it was supposed to be played. He said that he would rather have his team lose than play the booting the ball down the field kind of soccer, and he was adamant about it. He wanted his players to learn the art of passing, setting up plays, and the strategy of the game. If you watch most youth soccer games, that's what you see. Just the booting of the ball across the center line, maybe 1 or 2 passes, and then they shoot. So it's really all about the fastest and the most aggressive players getting the ball over and over. Where's the skill in that? And that was the coach's point. Which reminds me of a story. It's just a sidebar, but I think it's funny. And I remember in high school gym, a friend of mine, Brian Byrne, and I dominated in touch football with the same strategy, that I was just talking about in youth soccer. The basic plan here was I would be quarterback, and he would be receiver, or we would switch. It didn't really matter. Go deep. I'll hit you in the end zone. And that was it. And we would score. But the problem was is that we had 5 other players on the team. We only used 2, which reminds me of a story, I guess a sub-story within this sub-story. Same gym class, spring 1983, senior year, probably 4 or 5 weeks before a prom. Brian is, I don't know if Brian is listening, but if you are, I hope you're doing well. We are on defense. We both went up for an interception. I stepped in front of him, caught it, came down. My right elbow came down and smacked him square in the mouth. Long story short, I knocked his front tooth down his throat. I got 5 stitches. He went to prom with a gold tooth. Sorry, Brian. Back to soccer. Booting the ball down the field. That whole approach to youth soccer, booting it across the center line, makes winning easier, but it eliminates the need to connect lots of passes, and that's not a good thing. The emphasis on winning is preventing those kids from learning how to pass and set up plays, which is the skill they will ultimately need at higher levels of play. My point is, learn how to play the game the way it's supposed to be played, rather than learn how to win. They're not always the same thing. It was a lot tonight, America. I know. That's the way I see it. I'm sticking with it. See you next time.